George Washington, born in Westmoreland County, Virginia, 1732, died in Mount Vernon, Virginia, 1799. 2 terms, 1789 to 1797. Revolutionary War hero who defined a role of lasting importance as the world's first elected president. At 6 feet 2 inches, George Washington had big muscles, big moves, always elegant and powerful, and big feet, size 13. He stood out, literally head and shoulders above ordinary people. He looked the way people thought a president should. His look wasn't glamorous, with smallpox scars on his face and his mouth pushed out of shape by false teeth, made of materials like ivory, not wood as is commonly thought. Like many at the time, he felt that regular bathing was unhealthy, but he dressed fashionably and wore his military uniforms at every opportunity. Washington had other things working against him besides bad teeth. He wasn't scholarly. He had the equivalent of an 8th grade education. Insecure about preferring action to reading, he worried about manners and once copied by hand 110 rules about civility and decent behavior in company and conversation. He did subscribe to 10 newspapers, and he did keep a diary, but it was mostly a record of what the women looked like at balls. His ways with women weren't dashing. The mushy love poetry he wrote was unsuccessful until he met Martha Dandridge Custis, a wealthy widow with 2 children. Everyone who met her called her nice. He called her a quiet wife with a quiet soul. He wasn't fatherly, though he was thought of that way. His size intimidated children, as did the rarity of his smile. Partly this was to conceal his teeth, but also he felt that life was too serious for joking around. With no children of his own, he adopted Martha's. All evidence is that he was probably sterile. In public, he was a poor speaker, unless he had a prepared speech. Noticeably reserved, with a motto of, "Be courteous to all, but intimate with few," he was not the kind of man you slapped on the back. Someone did it once, and immediately, seeing his startled face, regretted it. It was a point of pride for him to hide his feelings, and he often communicated by silence or frowns. He did have a temper, and devoted much energy to controlling it. He wasn't fiercely ambitious. After his war service, he would have preferred life as a gentleman farmer at Mount Vernon, the estate he had inherited, and the only place where he was really at ease. But overriding all was a desire to make himself useful to others. When he was asked to do something, like lead the country instead of retiring to his farm, he always followed through. Modest and shy, he found fanfare embarrassing and would disappear if the praise grew too flowery. At the first reception in his honor, he was aghast to hear himself loudly announced as the President of the United States. At future events, he made sure he was already in the room when a reception started, casually leaning on the mantel so he wouldn't have to make a grand entrance. He appeared openly awed by his duties, almost sad, acutely aware that everyone was watching everything he did. "I walk on untrodden ground," he fretted. With no major scandal in his life, some thought him so pure as to be boring, or else chameleon-like, even hypocritical. But most were struck by his integrity. Influenced in part by his Episcopalian faith, he developed and stuck to a personal code of right and wrong. He went along with the custom of slavery, though he found it personally repugnant, and hoped it would end. In his last 20 years he rarely bought a slave, and found discreet ways to free some. In his will, he freed the rest upon Martha's death. People found other reasons to admire Washington besides integrity. He was rich, especially once he married Martha. As the country's first millionaire, he politely declined his presidential salary of $25,000, and he was an animal lover, Especially devoted to his faithful dogs, he gave them names like Sweet Lips, Madame Moose, Vulcan, and True Love. He had grooms brush the teeth of his horses every morning. But what really stood out about Washington was his sheer bravery. During the Revolutionary War, the British noticed that General Washington just would not give up or go away. Famous for taking daring risks and for superhuman stamina, he could stay awake for days at a stretch, even on horseback, and survive any ordeal, including walking through gunfire untouched. After the war, with Washington linked so closely to American independence, there simply was no other choice as leader. He is the only president who was elected unanimously. Also the only president not to live in the White House. It hadn't been built yet. Washington lived in various executive mansions. Up at dawn, he shaved and had his hair combed, powdered if the occasion was formal, and tied back with a ribbon. Breakfast was 3 buttered cornmeal cakes smothered with honey, plus 3 cups of tea. Favorite dishes included crab meat soup, one of Martha's specialties, sweet potatoes with coconut, ham with oyster sauce, and string beans with mushrooms. He usually went to bed early, but if visitors had interesting news, or if Washington particularly liked them, he would stay up to linger over champagne. When he finally returned to his beloved Mount Vernon after his presidency, he expanded the farm from 2,500 acres to 8,000, gradually taking over the neighborhood. "The General and I feel like children, just released from school," Martha confided to a friend. But the horde of visitors continued. Washington was such an excellent host that he'd bring hot tea to your room at night if he heard you coughing. One snowy morning when he was 67, he took his usual horseback ride around his property and soon afterward fell ill. Diagnosed with acute tonsillitis or pneumonia, he apologized for causing trouble and tried to make those near him less afraid of what would come. "It is well. I die hard, but I am not afraid to go," were his reported last words. Ever conscious of dignity, he requested a simple burial, but he got a spectacle anyway, complete with gun salute.